The 2025 season for the Colorado Buffaloes was not what they anticipated. A 3-9 finish is not great, and there were definitely some disappointing things. So we're going to take a look back at what went wrong, look at some of the good things that did happen this season. We'll look at the offense, the defense, the schedule, and also talk about what's next for Coach Prime and his program. A 3-9 season is disappointing no matter where you were at, but it's especially disappointing after Colorado went 9-4 in 2024. A 4-8 season in Coach Prime's first year was obviously disappointing, but as a record, but there were definitely signs that they were going in the right direction. The biggest thing coming into this year was the amount of talent that they were going to lose. We knew that they were going to lose talent, but what would that mean for the wins? What would that mean for the production? That was the biggest question that we had, and we'll talk more about what that means going forward. 1-11 in 2022, though, gives you a reminder that things could be worse. This could be a program that's in a much worse place. And I think that Deion Sanders has done a great job of at least changing the feelings towards the program, or at least setting new expectations. There was a point where Colorado expected to be at the bottom of the conference. That was just where they were at. But now Coach Prime has it where a 3-9 season is not acceptable, and they should be much better than they were. The fan base was very optimistic about this team heading into 2025, and it just ended up not being the case. Now, it was a tough season. Every month you saw struggles for the most part. 0-1, and you go against Georgia Tech. We'll dive into the schedule in detail later in the video, but September they go 2-2. So maybe we thought that this was still going to be a bowl team potentially. 1-2 in October, and then everything kind of came off the rails in November. 0-4. This was a team that was getting kind of worked in the first half. Getting outscored 42-66 in the first quarter, 85-127 in the second quarter. So they're falling behind and not really doing much to catch up. The scoring was not great. The offense did not do its part. 20.9 points per game isn't going to win you a ton of football games, especially when your defense gives up 30.5. And again, some of that had to do with there's so much talent still coming in. You had to replace a ton, and that makes things difficult for anybody that has to be able to run this offense, to be able to make plays for whoever they're facing. And there are other things that kind of came into play as well. When you look at the offense, we'll start with the quarterback position. I think the biggest thing that I have with Coach Prime and what he was doing this year was the use of the quarterbacks. The rotation early in the year, I think, is what kind of doomed them early. Caden Salter had his moments, obviously, of good play, and he obviously had moments where he struggled. The rotation that they decided to do early in the year, I think, is really detrimental to the offense's success. Playing Ryan Staub for as long as they did, yes, he had his moments, but I think that keeping with him longer term, or at least more than one game, was probably a mistake. And I thought that going into the Houston game, I didn't think that he was going to be the answer, but they went with it. And it was clear that the offense needed something better. You needed a more talented player. So I'm surprised they didn't go to Julian Lewis earlier, but maybe they were trying to keep his confidence. Ultimately, they put him in at the end of the year, and it feels like this is his team, assuming he doesn't go in the portal. Now, when you look at Caden Salter, you brought him in to give you a different element. You brought him in to obviously have a better year as a passer, but then you also brought the running element in as well. And I think that maybe this was an offense that wasn't quite ready for that. The amount of turnover that they had at every single position was difficult, and not just necessarily new faces coming in, but the amount of talent they lost. Losing Deion Sanders, the amount of wide receivers that they saw go to the NFL, that was always going to be tough to transition out of, but I think that that gave them a lot more than maybe they realized coming into the year. Julian Lewis, though, I think has some excitement to him. Now, there's things that he needs to do better, things that he needs to work on, but there is definitely something there. There is something that you can be excited about going forward. I think the wide receivers also showed us some things that you could potentially look forward to. But the wide receivers this year, you look at Omarion Miller, we thought maybe he could potentially be that go-to guy, and he ended up being that way. 45 catches, 808 yards, 8 touchdowns. He averaged 18 yards per catch. He was a bright spot on a team that definitely needed a guy to step up and be that wide receiver one. We thought maybe Joseph Williams could be that, Sincere Brown. We had a number of potential options that we saw going into the year for Colorado as guys who could potentially play huge roles in this offense. And Omarion Miller stepped up in a big way. Joseph Williams had his moments. Sincere Brown showcased his speed. Draylon Miller at times looked pretty good. But overall, this is an offense that was inconsistent throwing the football. They finished 94th in passing yards per game. And I think that the running element at least kind of balanced things out, but it still wasn't great. Guy Welch was a really fun player to watch when he had his moments, but 384 yards on the ground, 4 touchdowns, not going to really get the job done if you want to have success offensively. Now, Salter's legs obviously played a factor as well. 356 yards, 5 touchdowns. Dalen Hayden, 326 yards, 1 touchdown. A disappointing year for him. But I think that in terms of what we potentially expected from him going into this season, I think the rushing attack underperformed, and that obviously hurts an offense that was maybe going to rely on the rushing attack a little bit more, but at least the passing attack kind of elevated their game more than we anticipated. You weren't going to have the production that they had last year. You just can't expect that from a Colorado team that lost so much talent to the NFL draft. You can think that you're going to reload all you want, but it takes time to do that. And yes, Omarion Miller was fun. It was fun to watch him play and him succeed, but also the quarterback play just didn't play consistent enough and wasn't given the best opportunities. The offensive line obviously still had its struggles. Even they had struggles the last couple of years. There were struggles effectively. So that is something that has to be addressed going forward. And Deion Sanders talked about it. He knows that there are things they need to do. There are things that they need to do better. And whether that's coaching changes coming up, whether that is going in the portal like they've done before, there are things that are going to be different. There are things that are going to be hopefully better for 2026. Because when you look at this group, this offense can't have the struggles they did in 2026. It's going to be a long year if they do not fix some things. And it's also going to come down to how they perform defensively, because the defense obviously made things a lot more difficult than what we anticipated. And that hurt. That hurt an offense that was going through a bit of a transition. And the defense obviously lost some key pieces as well. But this is a group that didn't quite do what they needed to do to be successful. The defensive line wasn't as disruptive as maybe we anticipated. Keaton Wade showed some really exciting things. I thought that coming into last year even, I thought we could see some good things from him. I thought that he had the explosive ability on the edge to be disruptive. You saw a little bit of that this year. The defensive line overall brought in some talent that you thought maybe was going to step up. I thought that Jaheim Otis was going to be a bigger part of this defense, more disruptive. That wasn't the case. Overall, you didn't have a ton of disruption up front, and that's going to cause a lot of problems on the back end. Down the road, it's going to cause some issues. The defensive performance starts up front, and that group overall, I think, left something to be desired. The linebackers did what they could, but they also weren't super disruptive. Jeremiah Brown led the team with 85 tackles, or at least tied for the team lead. Reginald Hughes and Martavius French had their moments where they were flying around the field, but I think overall that group just couldn't make up for the lack of push up front, the lack of disruption. That makes things a little bit more difficult for everybody. Now, the one bright spot of this defense was that the pass defense was fairly good. 41st in passing yards per game. That was a group that lost quite a bit of talent, so that's promising. DJ McKinney, I think, stepped up as we anticipated. There were some concerns about him being the alpha of that group, and at least at cornerback. Losing Travis Hunter was always going to be a tough player to replace, but we knew that DJ McKinney coming back would give them at least somebody that could step up. And I thought that he did a good job this year of playing against the competition he did, making plays when he could. And overall, this secondary deserves a lot of credit for what they did. The safeties were good. I thought that Preston Hodge was tested quite a bit this year and it held up for the most part. So overall, you felt that the secondary met expectations and even exceeded those expectations. Lost quite a bit of experience, and this new group found a way to gel early and did what it could, especially with these struggles up front. So this defense overall didn't exactly give Colorado a ton to work with, but that's an area to work with going into next year. And again, changes are going to be made. If one thing we know about Deion Sanders is that he is going to overhaul the roster if he needs to. He's going to overhaul the coaching staff if he needs to. Something has to change, and it's going to be an interesting situation in Boulder depending on what he decides to do. Now, this was the year where we thought it was, I should say, coming into the year, I thought this was going to be a bowl team still. I thought they were going to take a big step back because of the talent they lost, but I still thought they had what it took to be potentially successful. And going against Georgia Tech, they kept that one close. Haynes King obviously played hero ball and took over as Superman, and Georgia Tech wins 27-20. Colorado gets their first win of the year, beating Delaware, and then the Houston game. I wasn't really sure what we were going to expect with Ryan Staub running the show there, but I don't really know what else we could have seen. It's hard to say. I wish they would have just at least done a multi-quarterback system instead of just going with one guy. It felt way too early to make that call. The Wyoming win wasn't great. Beating Wyoming 37-20 as Colorado, you should be winning that game by more. The thing is that things didn't really unravel. You know, they lose by 3 to BYU. They lose by 14 to TCU. So it wasn't like this is a bad team that just got unhinged. The upset win over Iowa State showed that this might be a team that still is in contention for a bowl game. This is still a team that is playing hard. Unfortunately, Utah and Arizona both dropped 50-plus points on them, and that's where it kind of felt like everything fell apart. The West Virginia game was close, but that's not a game that should have been close if this was a team still competing. I think that was a team that kind of just lost it a little bit, get crushed by Arizona State, and then lose by 10 to Kansas State and end the year. So a team that had potential to still make a bowl game just kind of fell apart in the final stretch of the season. You go 0-4 to 0-5 to end the year. That's not exactly a great way to end the season with any optimism, but I'm very curious to see what changes they make, because right now this is such a volatile program with the roster turnover, the coaching. It's going to be interesting to see what this team looks like in 2026. We haven't seen a ton that indicates there's a ton of stability with this program right now. They have shown that the first year under Sanders wasn't great. Second year was really good. This year, back to not being great. I'm very curious to see what they have in store. There are some nice pieces on this roster. There are some nice players on this roster. Recruiting has to be a focal point. You can't rely on the portal as much as they have, because we're seeing that the portal talent isn't as great as maybe we anticipated. So that limits the number of players that you can get. There's a lot of pressure on Deion Sanders to be able to get this team back on track, but that's a good thing. That changes the expectations for your program. I think if you're Colorado, you should expect better in 2026, because that is the change of expectations. If you're able to do that, if they're able to get to a bowl game in 2026, that is going to be a good thing. It's going to show that he knows how to fix things. He knows how to turn a program around, build the right roster, because I think he does a lot of good things for this program, for these kids. You just need to start seeing it on the field. And if they can do that, they'll kind of forget about this season. They'll kind of be able to move on, brush it off. And hopefully this staff learned from some of the mistakes that they made in 2025.